Dr. Ott, you shared that sometimes a sexual presence online can be affirming for young people. I know we tend to um, be dismissive or suspicious of that, but sometimes it can actually be a wonderful thing. And you referenced specifically for young people who are working out their sense of body image or sexual identity or gender expression, this can actually be a chance to try something else that they might be too cautious to try in real life. Can you share a bit more about that experience and what that's all about?
Yeah. I think we hear so much about the ways in which social media in particular is harming young people and their body image. And that is true. That is happening for some people. There's also research that demonstrates that high levels of pornography use by young men who already have a variety of other contributing social factors, that can be harmful for their self-understanding and their sexual relationships. So those things are true. But there is also research that's demonstrating the ways in which young people use social media to find other communities, to try out their different kind of gender expressions or sexual orientation. And there's also research that demonstrates that individuals who maybe come from a dominant orientation or gender identity, when experiencing a different orientation or gender identity in something like virtual reality, have a changed worldview and become much more inclusive and sympathetic to the kinds of social pressures that other people feel. So I want us to recognize there's a variety of ways of engaging social media, and how might we not lump it all into the same either negative category or the same positive category? How could we think about the really varied and nuanced way that this technology is used? So a simple example that I think maybe many youth leaders might be familiar with is the way in which young women often use Instagram. So, you know, there's a whole structure behind the kinds of photos and poses that young women, because of gender stereotypes, will post. Now, we might say that's horrible. That's culture pressing in. I also want to say, well, our Christian tradition really has a lot of gender stereotypes about what women are valuable for, so maybe we should disrupt those as well, and not contribute to the overall culture that's producing this. So let's do work there. But then let's also look at the comments, because what has happened is young women have also developed a structure by which they flood each other's photos with positive comments. And there is a whole sociology behind how you do this and why you do it. And if you sit down with young people, they will talk to you about it. How you respond to negative comments that someone kind of outside your group might post. If you're a cisgender, heterosexual young woman, what's appropriate or not appropriate for a guy to post in response to that photo. So, yeah, this is a lot to think about, but let's not pretend like they're not thinking about it. They're very strategic in the way that they are dealing with the variety of pressures. And yes, there can be negative outcomes, but there can also be really positive outcomes in terms of self-esteem. I also we've sort of stuck with social media, but if we think about the ways in which virtual reality is going to radically change the way that we interact with one another and with how we are embodied in our interaction with technology. So this is where the research has shown that when you have folks engaged in virtual reality spaces in a different gender or sexual orientation, and they're in social circumstances, it works best if it's not just a single virtual reality first person kind of interaction, but if there's also haptic technology, so I can
Mm,
like feel response from people,
mm,
that they've actually seen expanded worldviews, they've seen sort of more inclusive thinking, reduction of stereotypes or discriminatory thought happen there.
that's fascinating.
And young people might think about there's a novel, Ready Player One, and Ready Player Two is the sequel to it. And there's an example throughout that of the main character, how his own virtual reality experiences kind of change the way he starts to think about orientation and gender identity in a much more inclusive and equitable way
Mm,
throughout that text.
mm. That's fascinating. And it's so interesting as we try to, as Christians, embody a sense of humility and teachability in these things. to be able to use technology as a tool in this way, right? And not just say, nope, sexuality should not be connected to tech at all. To be able to say, no, this is another tool, right? This just is what it is, and let's see what we can do to use it for good. So that's really neat. Thank you.